When you hear the word pirate, who do you picture? Probably Johnny Depp drunkenly swaying on a pirate ship. And when you think of Vikings, do you picture women in battle armor leading raids? Probably not. But here's the thing, you probably should, because the current version of maritime history is incomplete. Women sailed, women fought, and women commanded fleets, and yet they've been erased from our textbooks and museums. For centuries, maritime history has been taught as a story of men, conquerors, explorers, soldiers, and captains. But that version is not just narrow, it's inaccurate. Women were there. But because most historians were men, and because power didn't look the same on women, their contributions were often dismissed or ignored. This erasure isn't just a historical issue, it's a present day problem. When we only teach stories about boys, we send the message that only men lead, only men fight, and only men make history. And that affects everything, from who gets promoted in the military to who runs for office and to how girls see themselves in the world. Restoring women to the narrative of maritime isn't just about the past, it's about what kind of future we want to build. Let's start with the Vikings, a culture we often imagine as entirely male-driven. But history, when we actually examine it closely, tells a very different story. In 2017, DNA confirmed that a high-status Viking warrior buried in Bergen, Sweden, surrounded by weapons and horses, was biologically female. For decades, since 1878, historians assumed it had to be a male. But Norse sagas, burial patterns, and new archaeology show that women fought and sailed in Viking society. They weren't just at home tending the hearth or being companions to male Vikings on their voyage. They were potentially storming the shores alongside of them. Women were written into the legends hundreds of years ago. The Gesta Danarum, a 12th century Danish history novel, includes story after story of shield maidens. These were fierce women who fought besides men. Fast forward a few centuries to the so-called Golden Age of piracy, and once again, women were there. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, active in the early 1700s, fought alongside men. They disguised themselves to survive, and when they were caught, they were tried for piracy like all of their other crew members. These two women may be the most famous pirate women, yet despite their courage, their story was almost lost, reduced to sensationalized anecdotes and a handful of books. Their male counterparts, like Blackbeard or Captain Kidd, have been immortalized in history books, movies, and folklore. Meanwhile, Anne and Mary are often treated as footnotes, overshadowed simply because they were women. And seafaring women aren't just confined to European history. Seafaring women history is part of a global history. Qing Shi, a name almost no one learns at school, led over 70,000 pirates in the South China Sea. She went against several countries' navies, and when she was caught, she was able to negotiate a peaceful retirement with all of her bounty. She was arguably the most successful pirate in history. Not female pirate, period. But because she didn't fit the builded stereotype, she's been left out. That's not just sexist, that's historically irresponsible. It's important to remember that most pirate stories we know today, whether about Blackbeard, Calico Jack, or Anne Bonny and Mary Read, are mostly part myth and part fact. Record keeping in the age of piracy was notoriously unreliable. Pirates lived outside the law, and there are barely any surviving primary records. Much of what we know comes from court records, hearsay, or sensationalized reports. So when we notice how often women pirate stories are missing or diminished, it's not simply because we lack the information. It's because of what society chose to preserve and what it chose to forget. Even in a world where myth was as powerful as fact, women are written out. Teaching maritime history through a feminist perspective isn't about inventing new heroes. It's about recognizing the ones who were always there, hidden beneath centuries of selective storytelling. So why does this matter today? Why should we care who gets remembered? Because the stories we tell and the stories we don't shape our ideal of power. When we ignore women in seafaring history, we erase the very ideal that leadership and courage can belong to women too. Teaching feminist maritime history helps girls see themselves not just as passengers, but as commanders of their own ships and, to be a bit cliche, their own destiny. And help boys grow up in a world where strength isn't limited to one gender. It builds a generation that values truth over the tradition. I'm asking to teach the stories that actually happened, the ones buried under centuries of bias. When we highlight and teach those stories, we send a message: women's stories matter. We show today's writers, historians, filmmakers, and students that women achievements are worth remembering, celebrating, and building upon. Every time we uncover a forgotten woman of history, we make it a little harder for the women of today and tomorrow to be overlooked. Teaching seafaring history from a feminist perspective is not just about correcting the past. It's about creating a culture that expects and values women's contributions in every field. And it's time we told their stories.